The main thing that meditation is doing, especially for beginners, is boosting your self-awareness. So you're seeing, essentially, it's waking you up to this fact that most of us are ignorant of, which is that we have this cacophony in our heads. We're having this nonstop conversation with ourselves, random thoughts, urges, impulses, most of it negative or desirous, all of it self-referential. And when you're unaware of this, it owns you. You're just acting out your thoughts. They become, as one of my favorite teachers says, little dictators. So the idea comes in, yeah, you should eat a whole sleeve of Oreos, and then you do it. Or you should say the thing that's going to ruin the next 48 hours of your marriage, and then you just blurt it out. What meditation does is wakes you up to this inner conversation, this clang and clatter, so that you aren't so owned by it. It's like having kind of an inner meteorologist that can see the hurricane before it makes landfall. So where that's useful with food is you can see the urge come up. You actually feel in your body this urge. You maybe even notice your hand moving like a zombie toward the cabinet, and you can let it pass because everything passes. The fundamental non-negotiable rule of the universe is everything is impermanent, and that includes your inner phenomena. And so your desire to eat a sleeve of Oreos, if you let it, will pass. And that is a hugely liberating thing, to see it come up and go, and then this is not here anymore.
Hey friends, welcome back. It's Mike Munsell with HighIntensityHealth.com. Thanks for showing up. Thanks for being here. The show with Dan Harris. I'm super excited to share this with you. To be honest, during the interview, I was a little nervous. I shouldn't have been. But you know how our minds create stories in our head, and the fact that Dan has interviewed so many wonderful people, Dalai Lama, Eckhart Tolle, so many. I was just a little intimidated, but he is such a humble, down-to-earth guy. I hope that comes through in this interview. I hope you enjoy it. Definitely check out his new book, Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. I like that book because it goes through the narrative about, teaching people how to meditate. I mean, we all know about the benefits. I mean, a lot of us do know. At least we see the headlines. Meditation slows down the aging process in the body. Meditation makes your brain look like a 20-year-old. Impulsivity, cortisol. I mean, there's so many health benefits, mental health benefits linked to meditation. But we see the headlines and we say to ourselves often, unfortunately, oh yeah, I'll start that next week. And next week you say, and then the week after that and so forth. And it never really happens. And so what I would suggest is definitely get and download Dan's app, 10% Happier, because he has some great tutorials with Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein and others that will help you learn practices and tips to get started so that this becomes a habit. This is part of the holistic, healthy lifestyle. I personally have been meditating for, my cousin kind of got me into it in 2014, then I stopped, and it was, inspired by Dan to go through the Insight Meditation Society and learn the Vipassana technique, which is a more mindfulness-based technique. I think if you just go to Insight Meditation Society or just Google that, there's often workshops in your local area. And I found the workshop conjunction with Dan's app and the podcast that he has, great interviews over at 10% Happier. Those kind of three different resources were enough for me to really make this a habit. And so I do this first thing in the morning for 10 to 15 minutes and then at night for 20 minutes. I find in the morning like I'm eager to get going, so I can't meditate as long. But this is really important, guys. And I would suggest, seriously, just make it a goal, put it on your calendar to start. And hopefully the information that we covered today will help you do just that. So I'm super grateful that you're tuning in, and let's dive back into it with Dan. Well, Dan Harris, thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Honor to be with you.
I hope I learned something.
Absolutely.
I would like to learn a bunch of stuff from you.
Yeah. Well, we can share ideas about, we were talking just now about the ketogenic diet and how you've been experimenting a little bit and going more low carb.
Well, I'm definitely on the margins of the keto diet, but I try to be low carb. As we record this, the Super Bowl was a few days ago, and I went to the Super Bowl party and had like a ton of pizza and then some pita chips, and I was basically sick the whole next day. And part of that was that I stuffed my face. Like once I start, I can't stop. But I'm starting to come to the realization that as somebody interested in mental acuity, sort of, sometimes there's a great phrase, emotional agility, the ability to kind of navigate your own inner environment with in a more supple way. What you eat plays a huge role in that. I mean, I exercise too, but you have to take care of the container as well.
Yeah. At what point in your life did you realize that the external factors like sleep, exercise, food, like that it made an impact in your life? Was it like at 20s or 30s, like that last phrase that you just mentioned?
Well, I mean, it's self-evident. So I've always known that. My parents are physicians, so I've always known that if you take care of yourself, you'll feel better, and I think most of us understand that. I think a couple things have happened. One is I'm 46 now, so I'm not that young, and I'm definitely not getting younger, and I'm just more sensitive to stuff. So I had to cut out dessert because for a couple of reasons. One, I'm an addict by nature, and once I started eating Oreos, I would eat enough that I would puke, and so I had to cut out dessert because I was going too far with it, and it was actually making me sick.
Yeah.
The next day I would, even if I had just a little bit of dessert, I would just feel off the whole day. It's just not worth it. And the same thing is becoming increasingly clear to me with heavy carbs.
Yeah.
If I have one piece of bread, it's probably not that big of a deal, but if I pound a pizza, it's not good. The other thing that's so age is part of it. As I get older, it's clear to me that I just can't handle. I had to stop drinking booze. I never had a problem with alcohol, but it just makes me sick.
Yeah.
So basically, as you get older, as you will experience, they just take shit away from you. The other thing is that I'm pretty dedicated meditator, and that boosts your self-awareness. And you become much more sensitive to sort of how sharp you are. And I notice that if I don't eat in a healthy way, and if I'm not exercising, not getting enough sleep, I'm not as sharp. And because I'm into meditation, I have a much stronger incentive to stay sharp.
Yeah. Now, how does meditation help you in that act? Like you said, if you have any little dessert, you're going to like overindulge sometimes.
Yeah.
Now you've been meditating now, what, 12 years?
9 years.
Okay. So you're aware that your body wants you to overeat. So you're mindful in the process, in the practice, but how does meditation kind of help you to remove yourself from that situation, or does it?
So I'll give you an example. I'm not great at this. Here's how it works in theory, and then I'll tell you how it's worked for me in practice. In theory, the main thing that meditation is doing, especially for beginners, is boosting your self-awareness. So you're seeing, essentially, it's waking you up to this fact that most of us are ignorant of, which is that we have this cacophony in our heads. We're having this nonstop conversation with ourselves, random thoughts, urges, impulses, most of it negative or desirous, all of it self-referential. And when you're unaware of this, it owns you. You're just acting out your thoughts. They become, as one of my favorite teachers says, little dictators. So the idea comes in, yeah, you should eat a whole sleeve of Oreos, and then you do it. Or you should say the thing that's going to ruin the next 48 hours of your marriage, and then you just blurt it out. What meditation does is wakes you up to this inner conversation, this clang and clatter, so that you aren't so owned by it. It's like having kind of an inner meteorologist that can see the hurricane before it makes landfall. So where that's useful with food is you can see the urge come up. You actually feel in your body this urge. You maybe even notice your hand moving like a zombie toward the cabinet, and you can let it pass because everything passes. The fundamental non-negotiable rule of the universe is everything is impermanent, and that includes your inner phenomena. And so your desire to eat a sleeve of Oreos, if you let it, will pass. And that is a hugely liberating thing, to see it come up and go, and then this is not here anymore. And it's also useful with anger and all sorts of other difficult emotions, but desire, especially as it applies to food, is difficult for many of us. So that's how it works in theory. I've found, and we have a whole course, as you probably know, I have an app called 10% Happier where we teach people how to meditate. Thank you. And we have a whole course on there with this amazing neuroscientist, Dr. Judd Brewer, and it teaches people how to do what I just described, how to sort of surf your own urges. I, frankly, though, I'm not very good at that. With dessert, for example, I only quit eating added sugar in the fall because it just became so obvious to me that it's poisoning myself, and that also it's this whole boring conversation all the time. Am I going to have sugar tonight? How much am I going to have? Blah blah blah. And just now that is over. My rule is, and I stole this from a friend of mine, Gretchen Rubin, who wrote a big book called The Happiness Project, because she quit having sugar. My rule is like, I'm just never having sugar again. If it's my birthday, you can bake me a cake, as Gretchen says, and I won't eat it. Because if I open up the door a little bit, I can't do moderation, because the way my brain works, and I've had problems with cocaine and in the past, the way my brain works, unfortunately, is when I start feeding it the stuff that will provoke a dopamine hit, I just have a lot of trouble stopping. Where I can see it working now is yesterday we had a staff lunch. One of my jobs at ABC News is I'm one of the co-anchors of Nightline. So we had a pizza lunch with a lot of my colleagues, and there were three things in the room. There was these delicious pizzas, big bowls of salad, and meatballs. And my plan was I'm just going to have a big plate of salad and a bunch of meatballs. You would have approved. But the pizza was calling at me, and especially as the meeting was kind of dragging on, and it just looked so delicious. And I was doing what I described, which is just watching. I could see, like, oh, I really want that pizza. But if you pause for a second and see it clearly, it will pass. And so that would be an example, a rare example of me letting it work.
I think you just illustrated a beautiful example of how meditation can help you. I think a lot of people think that when they start meditating, these feelings just go away. The road rage, the anger, the outburst you talked about with your spouse. But it's not that it goes away, it's just we're better managing. It's like you talk about in your new book, it's a picture within a picture.
Yes.
And so I think that's really helpful for people to understand, because I think a lot of people start meditating and then they stop because they're like, it's not working.
I still feel the same stuff.
Yeah, but
it's not the way it works. I mean, I wish it was. That would be awesome. And I think maybe at the deep end of the process, like monks who just do nothing but this for decades, probably. I mean, the proposition that the Buddha was talking about was that you could uproot all negative emotions. I'm not sure that's true. I've not seen that in myself or anybody I know. But what I have seen is that you can. Again, I'm just talking about the deep end, like serious practitioners. My meditation teacher, for example, who's been practicing for 50 years, he appears to suffer a lot less than most humans. But he doesn't, it's not the case that he never suffers, And so for the rest of us civilians, at the shallow end of the pool, the people who are just going to do a few minutes a day, or maybe 1 minute most days, what it does is you're not, I think, expecting sort of an uprooting of all anger, desire, sadness, fear is unrealistic. What it teaches you how to do is just what you said, to surf that stuff rather than drown in it. To, as I like to say, and this is a venerable meditation cliche, respond wisely to things instead of reacting blindly. That's what's happening, most of us. We're just controlled by the malevolent puppeteer of our ego. It's just dragging us around all the time, giving us terrible ideas, and we just, as I said before, act them out. And what meditation does is allow you to kind of step out of that process, see when it's happening, and not be so owned by it. It won't work 100% of the time, which is why I kind of came up with this jokey title of 10% Happier, because this isn't a silver bullet, but it's better than nothing. And think about it, the things that we most regret in our lives are when we just act mindlessly. Lose our temper, eat something we shouldn't eat, make decisions that don't redound to our benefit strategically, professionally. So this is just a way to do less stupid shit.
Yeah, brilliant. And it said, if we think about natural selection, right, a lot of traits that have positive attributes are selected for, and the people that have those traits pass on their DNA and reproduce. So this ego that you just spoke of, what benefit did it offer humans, and why is it still, if we're going to spend the rest of our life meditating for 10, 20, 30 minutes a day, why is it still there?
So I'm not an evolutionary psychologist, so I'm going to give you my answer, but just with that caveat. My understanding is that we developed this hypervigilant, pain-avoiding ego. So it's just this ego is just constantly thinking about the past, thinking about the future, trying to get good stuff, trying to avoid bad stuff. We evolved for this because it was useful on the savannah. You wanted to avoid, back in the hunter-gatherer days, saber-toothed tigers. I guess saber-toothed tigers probably were not on the savannah, but you wanted to avoid danger, and you wanted to find food, and sexual partners. Why? Because evolution doesn't care about your long-term health. It cares about getting your DNA into the next generation. And so my understanding is that some of these things still serve us today, many of them don't. And what we need to do through meditation is kind of hack this process and to see that we actually can access parts of our brain and our mind that that nobody bothers to point out to us that are available. When I talk about stepping out of the traffic, the sort of cacophony of your own mind, there's a word for this called mindfulness. It's the opposite of mindlessness. And it's your birthright. We are classified as a species as Homo sapiens sapiens, the one who thinks and knows he or she thinks. But that second sapiens has atrophied over time because nobody bothers to point out to us that we have this bonus level in our brain and our mind. And all that meditation is doing is helping you boost that skill.
That's really great. So do you think that's why, you traveled the country recently with Jeff, right?
Yes.
Was that like in the fall?
That was so it was January 2017, and then we wrote a book about it that just came out in January or late December of 2017. So it was a pretty quick
turnaround.
Yeah.
No, it's an awesome book.
Thank you.
And so the goal was to teach people how to meditate and figure out what their barriers were to make it a daily practice. And what you talk about this in the book, but I'd love to kind of dive into it now. Like, what were some of those barriers, and how do people overcome the barriers to implementing this as a habit?
So the backstory, and then I'll answer your question. So I wrote a book 4 years ago called 10% Happier, which was it was a memoir, really, or I like to describe it. It was a argument dressed up as a memoir. The argument was you should meditate, and I thought, based on my whole career as a visual storyteller, I thought the best way to make that argument was just to tell you my own story, and to make it funny and embarrassing, and use the word fuck a lot, and just to make it unlike any other meditation book you'd read. I didn't think anybody was going to read it because I'm like sort of a B-level network newsman who was talking about what I thought was kind of a niche subject, and at the time it was meditation. But then I got lucky. First of all, my employer, Disney, which owns ABC, really promoted the book, and it kind of came out at the right time where meditation was starting to become cool. And but I realized after the book came out and it started to do well that I had miscalculated. I thought naively, and maybe even cavalierly, frankly, that anybody who read the book would start to meditate, because I thought I made a good case. But that is to completely ignore what we just discussed about the nature of the mind that has been bequeathed to us through evolution. Forming healthy habits is really difficult for people. It's really difficult for people. So after the book came out, I did a couple things. One of them was I started this company called 10% Happier, that teaches people how to meditate through an app. And we have all these great teachers that we've been talking, like Dr. Brewer and all these, in my view, the world's leading meditation teachers come on, and we do these sort of short video lessons that lead directly into a guided meditation. We make it fun and sort of very easy to do. But working in this company, I'd never been a businessman before. Working in this company, it really gave me a front row seat at the rich pageant of human neuroses that stand in the way of adopting this sort of manifestly healthy habit. And so I decided to write this book, which is called Meditation for Fidgety Skeptics. And that is the road trip that Jeff and I took, where Jeff Warren is this great meditation teacher from Toronto. I recruited him. We got this big, stupid orange bus, and it was previously occupied by Parliament Funkadelic, and we went across the country. And the goal of the book was to find out what is stopping people from meditating. It's actually a 3-part goal, which is, in the middle of writing the book, I was like, oh yeah, there's a reason why nobody's written a book like this before, because it's a pain in the ass. But the 3 things I wanted to do in the book was, 1, to tell a fun story of this road trip. 2, to find out what's stopping people from meditating, people who want to meditate. What is stopping them from meditating? And help them do it, and help them sort of find some hacks to get over the hump. And 3 is just to basically teach basic meditation. So on the road trip, we met, cops, politicians, celebrities, social workers, formerly incarcerated kids, all sorts of people who have an interest in doing this. My wife, who has an interest in meditation but wasn't doing it, and we helped people figure out how to actually do this in their lives. And to answer the actual question you asked me, I would say the 2 biggest obstacles we found, I think 8 primary ones that we talk about in the book. Every chapter is a different obstacle. The two biggest ones are, one is I can't clear my mind. This fear that you're not meditating correctly if you have any thoughts whatsoever, which is bullshit, and we can talk about that. And the other is that I don't have time for this. People think it's going to be some big time commitment, which again, it's not.
Yeah, people say they don't have time to incorporate a new habit and things like that. But one of the things that I think there's a big myth out there, definitely want to get into the benefits and talk about how we can, you talk about in the book, the nanoseconds, just nanoseconds of focus or being aware. But a lot of people think like, well, I'm already meditating because I run or I exercise, right? And that, what are your thoughts?
So we tackle that specifically. We have a whole chapter about this, which is called Blank is My Meditation, because I hear this all the time. I'll give a whole speech. I travel around the country and I give talks. I'm going to Indiana after this interview to talk to people, and I'll give a whole talk about meditation and tell a bunch of jokes and I think make the case with some science and stuff like that. And then inevitably, one or two people will come up and say, I'm already doing this. Running is my meditation, or knitting, or whatever, petting my iguana. And my answer to that is maybe. I'm not saying that you can't run in a way that is meditative, but I don't think most of us do. The way I run is I listen to music and practice cursing out my boss. And that is it can have it has many health benefits. I'm pro-running, strongly pro-running. And it does have the benefit of sort of calming you down. If you're depressed and you go to a doctor, the first thing a smart doctor will tell you to do is to exercise. So it has antidepressant effects. It obviously has lots of health benefits. But meditation is something different. Meditation is systematically trying to pay attention to whatever's happening right now, and then when you get distracted, starting again and again and again. And so you could run in a meditative way if you ran like this. No headphones, and what you're going to do is really try to pay attention to the feeling of your body moving. Your legs moving, your arms pumping, wind on your face, and then you're going to get distracted a million times. And every time you do, you kind of gently just start again and again and again. By the way, it makes running much harder because you're not distracted. Right. You're not like overwhelmingly distracted by pumping beat or something like that, or wandering off in your head endlessly and sort of abstracting away from the rigorous workout. When you're just really paying attention to the workout, in my experience, actually can be much harder. But that would be meditation. And meditation more formally, and you said this before, that a lot of people think that when they get distracted that they're not meditating. Meditation more formally is just like sitting here like this. You close your eyes and you try to pay attention to the feeling of your breath coming in and going out. Like you pick one spot where it's most prominent, your belly, your chest, your nose. And then as soon as you try to do this, your mind will mutiny. You'll be invaded by all these what's on my to-do list thoughts, or who do I hate right now thoughts, or what am I going to watch on TV tonight thoughts. And the game is just to see when you become distracted and to start again and again and again. And when you become distracted, that's the moment a lot of people think, oh, I'm a failed meditator. But actually, it is the moment that is proof that you are doing it right. Seeing that you're distracted and then starting again is meditation. That is meditation. It's not like you're supposed to sit there and all thoughts will evaporate. That is only going to happen when you're either enlightened or you've died. The whole game in meditation is to see how fucking crazy you are, because when you see it, it no longer owns you as much. And that's what we're training in meditation. So in that moment when you wake up from distraction, whether you're doing this while you're running or sitting, it's time for a pat on the back rather than self-flagellation.
Mm-hmm. How do you differentiate or help people better understand those moments? Like sometimes some sessions are very relaxing, the mind's very quiet, and other times it's just a chaos. Like how do you help people differentiate that and then achieve those higher levels of just that calm, those calm
Stop
sessions?
trying to achieve anything. That's not the point. That is absolutely not the point. It actually is a hindrance to doing what you're supposed to be doing in meditation. I should be clear, there are thousands of kinds of meditation, and there are some kinds of meditation that you really are trying to achieve a thing. But when I talk about meditation, I'm talking about mindfulness meditation, which is secular, simple, a lot of science to back it up. Most of the science that's been done around meditation has been around mindfulness meditation. It's derived from Buddhism, but has been kind of stripped of all of the metaphysical claims and religious lingo. And the goal in mindfulness is you absolutely are not trying to feel a certain way. You are just trying to feel whatever you feel so that it doesn't own you. So you sit, try to focus on your breath, and some days actually you're going to be able to stay with the breath for a certain, you may actually be able to stay, and some calm may come up. You may notice yourself really liking the calm, and then maybe you want to notice how attached you are and let it go and just go back to the breath. Because there's no guarantee that your next sit is going to be calm. And again, the point isn't to feel calm. The point is to learn how to see clearly what's happening in your head so that you can navigate it in a more supple way. Now, there are some forms of meditation that are really specifically designed to calm you down, and those are cool too. But I think it's very hard to do for beginners, so I think it's easier just to say, hey, the point is not to get all wound up about feeling a certain way, because actually that desire, that striving to feel a certain way, will interrupt your ability to get what you want anyway.
Because is that desire ultimately from the ego, and we're trying to dissipate the ego? Is that kind of the...
I write about meditation and I practice it in a quite dedicated way, but I am not a meditation teacher. So that sounds right to me, but I don't know for sure. Like if we had a Buddhist scholar on who could break down exactly what's going on in the mind when you are striving for a certain state of experience, I can't do that. But what I can basically say is, yeah, it's a kind of mental energy that gets in the way of what you think you want, which is the opposite of striving, calm. Calm is, there is no striving. Real calm is, there should be no striving whatsoever. So the move when you notice yourself striving is just to notice yourself striving. You can say this, there's a great tool called mental noting. So you're focusing on your breath, and then you're noticing, oh, wow, I'm really pushing for something here. Just make the mental note of striving or desire. Back to the breath. It'll probably come roaring back a nanosecond later. Striving. Just go back to the breath, back to the breath. And in this way, you're kind of defanging this, what heretofore was sort of monolithic force of the voice in your head, which you think is kind of just telling you the truth. It's like the voice of God. But you just start to see that these are just random thoughts flitting through. These are impermanent mind states that can be viewed impersonally, like, oh yeah, this is just a passing squall of desire. This is just a passing squall of striving. And then, what's the point of this? When you're in the rest of your life and somebody cuts you off in traffic and you can see the road rage come up, and instead of chasing the person down the road, screaming with your kids in the back, thinking you've lost your mind, you can let it pass some percentage of the time. Yeah. Sometimes you'll still get caught.
Mm-hmm. And just be aware of it and try and be mindful when you can.
Look, I mean, what I've noticed is that I still get angry, but it's shorter, because anger is a passing state of mind. And if somebody walked in here right now and said something infuriating, and we would feel anger, and but then we would have a choice, which is, are we going to continually neurotically and obsessively re-up that emotion? Or we're going to let it pass and make a wise decision about the best way to handle the situation. And as I have a friend, Sam Harris, who's a popular podcaster, he has said that, it cuts down on the half-life of anger. Meditation does. The amount of damage you can do in an hour of anger versus 2 minutes, this is incalculable. And so I find for me, I still get carried. My wife will say something and I'll get angry, but I will act on it. But I'll catch myself sooner. And so it'll diffuse the situation much quicker than it used to be earlier in our relationship. And I'm better at just sort of re-channeling the conversation toward something positive.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I like that analogy. It cuts down the half-life.
Yeah, it's not mine, but it's a good one.
That's a really good one. Well, thanks to you, I learned meditation through the Vipassana Insight Meditation group, and I like their model, and that's what you still practice, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when you said mindfulness, let's talk about like kind of the origins of that, maybe the Insight Meditation Society and Sharon Salzberg and
Salzberg,
Yeah.
Joseph Goldstein. They're the primary teachers on the 10% Happier app. They're these two pioneers who helped bring meditation. They went over to India in the 60s and 70s, learned it from masters for years, lived there for years, and then came back and started teaching it here.
Mm-hmm. And how would you differentiate that for people who are wanting to take that next step and learn the Vipassana or mindfulness strategy that you referred to, and then kind of the mantra-based, like Vedic and TCM?
Okay, so let me see if I can paint the sort of landscape here. So when people talk about meditation these days, generally speaking, there are two terms that get thrown out: mindfulness or TM, which is transcendental meditation. Mindfulness is a secularized version of Buddhist meditation. In the Buddhist tradition, they would call it Vipassana, which is the word that you were using, which is what Sharon Salzberg and Joseph Goldstein teach. Although when they teach on our app, we don't really use the Buddhist lingo, we just teach mindfulness, which again is, it's the same technique. Sit, watch your breath coming in and going out. When you get distracted, start again. So you can, if you learn it from them, if you go to the Insight Meditation Society, which they founded in Massachusetts, you're going to learn it in a sort of Buddhist context. But when they step out of that realm and teach on our app, and go to a corporation and talk about it, they talk about it in a pretty secular way without the Buddhist lingo. So that's the one half of the picture, which is you have this whole Buddhist tradition that has a bunch of forms of meditation. One of them is called Vipassana, and out of Vipassana grew the secular mindfulness practice, which is what has been studied extensively in the labs and shown to, or it strongly suggests that it will lower your blood pressure, boost your immune system, rewire key parts of your brain, et cetera, et cetera. So that's on the one hand. The other hand, there's Hinduism, out of which grew transcendental, or Vedic and transcendental meditation. That practice is unlike in mindfulness, where you sit, feel your breath coming in and going out, and then start again. They use a mantra, a word, sort of a word without any meaning. It's usually a Sanskrit word that you repeat to yourself silently, and you focus on that. And then when you get distracted, you start again and again and again. And that too has been shown to have lots of health benefits. So these are two different schools of meditation, but there's a lot of overlap in terms of what the benefits are.
So it's similar, like if you want to look at like the pharmacology or the physiology, it's probably very similar. But the mantra just kind of helps for some people that are maybe new to it with that monkey mind and so forth. They can focus on that instead of their breath.
Yeah, but the breath is also a way to, both are techniques that help you see that you have a monkey mind in the first place, which is news to most people. And then second, to sort of intermittently get focused on it for sort of nanoseconds at a time. And then when you get distracted, start again and again and again. There are lots of other differences between the practices. In my view, Vedic/TM, which I think is a great practice, both of them, they're basically the same thing from what I can tell. I don't do either of them, so I'm not an expert. I want to be clear about that. Vedic/TM, transcendental meditation, it is much more calming because it's a concentration exercise. You're getting really focused on this mantra, blotting out most of your other thoughts, and it can have a calming feeling. Mindfulness meditation can also be calming because you're focused on the breath and some of your thinking slows down, but it's really about embracing the full cacophony so that it doesn't control you, and that is mindfulness. So there are these two great schools in meditation. There's the concentration school and there's the mindfulness school, and there's a lot of overlap between the two, but the benefits are slightly different. Concentration can produce calm and tranquility, and mindfulness can produce a sort of insight into the nature of what your mind is actually doing.
Love it. So one of the things that I found to be very helpful is like a walking meditation, or just like waving your hand like this, at first, because that helped me realize just being aware. What are some tools? And then actually I learned this, sorry to like bounce all over the place, but this was the best strategy, I think. When starting, this was a long, like 2 or 3 years ago, one of your guests talked about holding one nostril and then imagining like impatience, irritation, like the back.
Is that Emma Sepala?
Might have been, yeah.
Yeah, maybe. I think she's the only one I remember talking about this. But anyway, go ahead.
So these are like some really good strategies that you talk about in your podcast and in the book and on the app. What are some high hit rate strategies that can help people kind of get into that meditative state or just be more mindful?
People looking to get into a meditative state can be kind of a misleading, it can lead you down a path that ultimately leads to pushing hard to reach a state. When I talk about meditation, the state is just waking up. It's just like seeing clearly what's happening right now. Are you aware of the feeling of your butt on this right now? Are you aware of the tension between your hands, not tension, but like the pressure between your two hands as you cup them? That is a meditative state. That is just known as being awake. So that is all we're striving for in mindfulness meditation. Being awake so that you see clearly what is happening in your mind and in your actual life right now, and can make wiser decisions based on real data rather than the noise of your ego. So I just want to, that's one reaction I had to the thing you were saying. Yeah. But so in service of waking up, there are millions of little practices you can do, and we talk about them a lot in the book. One of them is just the formal seated meditation where you, again, sit, try to feel your breath, and then when you get distracted, start again. But you can scale that to lots of stuff. So there's walking meditation, which can be done in two ways. One is informally, so you're walking between meetings, and you just decide, instead of looking at your phone the whole time, maybe walking into a wall, you're going to feel your legs moving. You're going to notice what you're seeing. You're going to notice the light breeze on your face or whatever. You're just going to tune into the physical sensations of the activity, and then when you get distracted, start again, start again, start again. Then there's a formal kind of walking meditation, which I do a lot, especially because sometimes I work early in the mornings and I'm tired and I want to meditate, but I know that if I sit to meditate, I'll fall asleep. So I'll do a slow walking meditation where in a room like this, you would start on one side of the room and go to the other, and you would walk painfully slowly, really very slow. And you would notice the sensation of lifting, moving, placing again, lifting, moving, placing again. And then when you get distracted, start again and again and again. And this is a great practice, especially for people like me, who are really fidgety and don't want to sit still. This is a great way to do it. And again, it's the same result in the end, which is just waking you up. We are lost in this fog of rumination and projection, thinking about the past, thinking about the future, thinking about what we want, what we're trying to avoid. And meditation it's a little annoying, but it is this practice of just bringing you back to whatever's happening right now, the raw data of your physical sensations, so that you can scale that to the rest of your life.
Oh, that's brilliant. I think I've been viewing it wrong, viewing it too much of not even being aware of the present moment, focusing on the future, that meditative state.
The thing you're trying to get. Well, but that's totally natural. First of all, I've done that. I still do that. So just to make you feel better, I mean, I go around and lecture people about this, but I'm a huge hypocrite. I still sit in meditation and berate myself for not feeling a certain way. I just have to learn the lesson over and over and over again, kind of like a dog with having its snout rubbed into poop. So you have to learn this lesson over and over and over again, like a dog, with its snout being rubbed into the poop. Although I make that analogy sometimes pointed out to me by dog trainers that it's not a good way to train a dog. But that being said, we do have to learn over and over again that striving is counterproductive. Also, in your defense, as a guy who's really interested in health and also trying to make a podcast popular, you're used to doing a thing and getting a certain result. And that makes sense on many levels. You eat a certain way, and the goal is to feel a certain way and to have measurable outcomes. And it absolutely makes sense. Meditation is a little counterintuitive, not counterproductive, counterintuitive for type A people, because it isn't like you do a certain input and then get a certain result. It doesn't quite work that way. It's more that you want to go into it with an attitude of interest and exploration about what is actually happening right now. And the goal, again, there is a goal, which there are many potential goals, but they should be lightly held, is that you are more awake to what's happening in your own head so that you're not so yanked around by it.
So how do you feel? There's a lot of people now going on ayahuasca journeys and doing like psychedelic mushrooms and trying to I don't want to say circumvent, but shortcut the process a little bit. What are your thoughts there?
It's definitely not a circumvention, or I hope it's not a circumvention, but I've heard it described as an accelerator. I have looked into doing it myself, but have panic disorder, and I quite famously had a panic attack on national television back in 2004 as a consequence of doing cocaine. I wasn't high at the time, but I had been doing it in my personal life. After coming home from covering a lot of war zones and getting depressed, I started self-medicating, and that cocaine usage upped the level of adrenaline in my brain and led to me to have this panic attack on national television. So I then had to quit doing drugs, and I was seeing this shrink who's an expert in panic for many, many years. I still see him occasionally. And I talk to him all the time about my interest in specifically psilocybin, which is the active ingredient in mushrooms, which is being studied at Johns Hopkins right now, Johns Hopkins University. They're looking at what kind of effect it has on meditators. I'm really interested in that. I actually think there may be some there. But his point is, when you have panic disorder and you have to perform on live television, screwing with your brain chemistry is probably not a great idea. So I have not done this and probably won't do it. But I am really interested in it, and I think that psychedelic drugs have been demonized by the government for a long time. I'm not sure that was wise. And I actually think there may be healthy uses of them. I'm a little worried of people freelancing and doing it on their own. I just don't know how safe that is. I literally don't know how safe that is. Yeah. But the fact that it's being studied, Michael Pollan has written, who I'm sure you know, has written a bunch of books. He's got a new book, they sent it to me the other day, it hasn't come out yet, but it's called How to Change Your Mind. And it's about psychedelics. Wow. He wrote what is available right now is he wrote a beautiful article, Michael Pollan did, in the New Yorker a couple of years ago, and I believe that's what turned into this book, about the use of psilocybin on cancer patients who have anxiety. It's truly beautiful. I mean, actually very moving, and I say this is not a very sentimental guy. I think there's a lot of promise there. Again, I'm just a little worried about people doing this on their own, but I've had guests on the podcast. Jeff Warren, my co-author, leads ayahuasca retreats in
Peru.
Wow. I think in Costa Rica. And then I had another guest, a woman named Spring Washam, who I really love, and she does the same thing in the jungles. So people I respect are doing this. I don't want to vouch for its safety. What I do hope is that we can learn more about the efficacy and that it can then be delivered in a safe environment with medical help. Supervision, exactly. That's the word.
Standardization. So I recently have been dabbling with this a little bit. Now I would say, so the mushrooms and the LSD microdosing, I think, won't affect potentially panic disorder, just my own personal experience, but the DMT or the ayahuasca could. I noticed a little bit more like, and this is kind of the final question I wanted to ask you about, is this energy that we hear about chakra systems and energy and intention, and do you think, since meditating, like your energy and your intention centers and your ability to like tune in to what the world, the universe, the ether, whatever we want to call it, is kind of telling you? Are you more aware of these subtle nonverbal cues, you think?
I don't even really know what that means. Chakras, I don't know what chakras really are. I've never really looked at it. Actually, that comes more out of a Hindu system than Buddhism, which I have spent some time really looking at and practicing. To my ears as a skeptic, it sounds a little woo-woo, like I don't really know what any of that means. But my life in the last 9 years since discovering meditation has been a series of seeing how my skepticism is sometimes goes too far and shuts me off to things. So this may be a case of that. Sure. But as of right now, I don't know about anything about energy fields or chakra systems or intuition or anything like that. But I don't rule it out.
Well, I mean, you talk about in the book, like almost as a man crush, you were being joking with how when Jeff came into your life, you said like you stalked him on the internet or whatever. So you wonder if that has like a deeper energetic, and now it's turned into this great partnership and you're impacting the lives of other people. So that's why I was kind of curious to see.
But it's a question, like, is that some sort of deeper energetic directional thing, or is it just like a natural process of once you get interested in something and you see somebody else who's really good at the thing and you try to create a relationship with them? It can be explained in much more pedestrian ways. I tend to veer in that direction because I was raised by a pair of scientists. I'm married to a scientist. I was not good enough at math to ever do science, but that's my inclination. So the simplest explanation is the one that I tend to gravitate toward. Sure. But again, I want to give the caveat that over and over, I realize I'm like the anti-blink. You know, Malcolm Gladwell wrote this great book about the wisdom of our subconscious, our quick decisions. For me, it's that my quick decisions suck. So my gut is often wrong about these things. So I could be back here in 2 years talking to you about chakras and with a lot of conviction.
Yeah, I'm just recently kind of learning more about it. I know enough to be dangerous. So anyway, just curious about that. All right, so we have a few pattern questions that we ask every guest on the show. So for many years, you've gotten up at 3:45 in the morning.
On Saturdays and Sundays.
Okay.
So I do weekend Good Morning America, but during the week I anchored Nightline. So it's all over the place.
Yeah. Well, that's very early, and you have to perform.
Yes.
So we know successful people have habits, rituals, routines.
Yeah.
If you want to have a really productive day, and be on point, what do you do in the first couple hours of your day?
So I've been doing this weekend morning shift for 7 years now, and so a couple of things. One is what you do the night before is incredibly important. So don't eat an unhealthy meal because you will feel like shit when you wake up. And also salty foods, fatty, salty foods will actually show up in your face. And I have to look at my stupid face on television. So actually eating a sort of a healthy, low-fat meal and getting to bed on time really makes a huge difference. Then in the morning, I actually wake up earlier, so I don't have to be until 5, and I live 7 blocks from the office, so I could push it and sleep until 4:30. But I actually get up at 3:45, and I do a bunch of stretching, and take a shower, and then I sit for meditate for about 15 minutes, all before, in the hour between 3:45 and 4:45 when I leave for the office. If I follow that, then I walk in pretty crisp.
Mm-hmm. Right, and do you sit on a cushion? You have like a dedicated spot in your house?
I'm really not religious about this. First of all, I have terrible posture, as anybody who's watched this video can probably tell. So I sit on a chair, and I don't even sit like this. I actually sit back, although this is not a good one, but I sit with my back supported on a chair, and I'm really I'm very flexible about where I sit and when. I will, as soon as I get in this car and I'm going to get in a car and go to the airport, I'll meditate in the back of the car, I'll meditate on the plane, I meditate in whatever room is available to me at home. I live with a wife and 3 cats and a 3-year-old, so it's not like every room is available to me at all times. So I'll just go in whatever room I can and sit where I can. Mm-hmm. So I really try to lower the bar and not make it some
lotus position.
Yeah, precious thing that you can only do in one place. By the way, that is cool. For some people, they really need that. And if that's available to you, go for it. You should do what really helps you embrace the practice. So for me, what helps me embrace the practice is maximal flexibility. But for some people, having a special place that you maybe decorate in some way can be useful.
Yeah, I'm that person. I find having my cushion, my space, because then it's like it's there to remind me to do it.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
Do you use your app as a timer, or do you just sit there and when you feel comfortable?
I use a bunch of different tools. I use my app as a timer, and also because I do like to do guided meditation sometimes. So I switch back and forth between meditating on my own and then using guided meditations. And I love our teachers, so there's just so much there in the app. So many great meditations. Sometimes I'll just use literally the stopwatch on the phone, because when I get in the car, I don't know how long it's going to take me to get to the airport. So there's no point setting a certain time length. I'm just going to go until I get to the airport. So then I'll tally it up at the end. I try to get to 2 hours a day, which is a big goal to have. And I only got there about 2 years ago. But my rule is I can do as many increments as I want, wherever I want, whenever I want, and the goal at the end of the day is to get to 2 hours.
That's a great goal. I mean, that's a stretch goal for a lot of people.
Stretch goal, yeah, for me too. But I figure I'm writing books about this thing, and
yeah, hold yourself accountable in that way. All right, so if you were to bump shoulders with a politician, which I'm sure you have, do all these lectures and so forth, in an elevator, and you just had 30 seconds to share with them an insight or an aspect of meditation that they may not know, what would you want politicians to know so that they can maybe help the masses and a lot of people better?
I would say, have you ever noticed you or your constituents or your colleagues getting carried away by emotions in a way that is not constructive, believing stories without investigating the veracity, hating people in the other tribe without a lot of basis beyond pure emotion? Have you ever noticed inner celebration when something bad happens to somebody who's in the other tribe? Would you believe that at the end of the day, actually, we should come together and transcend some of this tribalism? I think meditation is a great way to counteract that, so that we can all see some of our biases and uncharitable impulses vis-a-vis those on the other side of a debate, and not be so governed by them. That doesn't mean you have to abandon your principles, but it means you can fight for your principles in a way that has a higher civility and sanity quotient.
Well said. Dan Harris, thanks so
Thank
much
you
for coming on the show.
Great questions.